Action stations.
Greetings, folks. Anila Horam here with a World of Warships replay. Today we are again featuring Jimijaz, and this time he is in the Tier 10 U.S. Navy Heavy Cruiser, the USS Des Moines. He is in a domination match on Haven. The team rosters are rich with battleships, and there are no aircraft carriers. Jim is using the John Doe Unique Commander for his ship, and he has kind of a competitive commander skills structure with radio location, and he is using the gunfire control system upgrade in slot 6 to extend the range of his artillery. Now, in this battle, Jim is going to need to coordinate with his allies, particularly late in the battle, to preserve any chance of winning. And this can be kind of difficult when you have players that are not in a division together and they're not in active voice communication, and have to use chat and hopefully use situational awareness of each other to be able to pull off a win. And that's definitely going to play a key role here for Jimijaz and his team. So let's get to the gameplay. Now, Jimijaz has spawned on the east side, so he's going to move towards the Charlie Cap to support taking and holding it. And we can see that there are two immediate tactical issues that the Allied team has set for itself. First is the vast majority of the team is moving to the west flank, and so there's an imbalance of power in the Allied team between the two cap areas. And the second issue is that 3 of the 4 Allied destroyers have also moved to the Charlie Cap. Now, the Khabarovsk would probably prefer to be on the east flank where he has a little more room to run around and do his thing. But it would have been better to have one of either the Fletcher or Goering move to Bravo to contest the cap, while the Allied Jimijaz goes wide and uses his long torpedo range and very good concealment to be able to spot on the west flank. But that's not how things have worked out. Now, as luck would have it, the opposing team has also kind of lemminged to the Bravo cap. So from a balance of power perspective, it's pretty even for each team. Now, Jim is putting some fire here on the opposing Khabarovsk that has shown up on the east flank. And you'll notice that he's using AP shells here. And we'll come back to why that is a little bit later when Jim runs into the Khabarovsk later on. Now, the Allied team has taken the Charlie Cap. We can see there is an opposing Des Moines, which is in the Delta 8 quadrant, and he is now putting some fire on the Allied Fletcher, and that's going to push him off the cap. And here we can also see that the Allied Fletcher is also being harassed by the Khabarovsk because he was being lit up by the radar of the Des Moines. The Allied Worcester was wildly overextended on the west flank. I think he was down in like the H or the Hotel 2 quadrant. And so he was taken out very early. And so the Allied team is already has a 1-ship deficit. Jim is trying to back up here because he is being detected. And he pops his radar, and here he sees the opposing Haragumo. Now, the opposing Haragumo, I think, should have known that Jim was here, and yet he showed up with a broken engine. So I'm not sure what his thinking was here, but Jim is now putting some sustained fire on the Haragumo. Haragumo is almost dead. Here, Jim switches to to AP, because at these angles, he is going to be able to pen, and those AP shells are going to be full penetrations and do potentially substantially more damage than the HE shells would. And again, this is going to be an important point that we'll come back to when Jim runs into the opposing Khabarovsk later in the match. Jim is able to support getting the opposing Haragumo down off the flank, and we continue to hold the Charlie Cap. You can see that the opposing teams over at the Bravo side are all kind of huddled in their little groups, opposing each other. It probably would have been kind of interesting to see what the gameplay was like on that side of the map. The opposing Des Moines that was on the west flank has now been taken out by the allied Jimijaz, and now the opposing Massachusetts that was too far forward on the west flank has also been taken out. So the allied team has gotten a one-ship advantage at this point, which is good. But the allied Jimijaz has taken a fairly substantial risk in what he had done, pushing that far deep into the opposing team's position, because he could have been detected and focused out quite early, but with luck, he has been able to take out the opposing radar cruiser on that flank, and is able to get some distance from the opposition. Although you can see that there is a Hindenburg and a Montana that are trying to close in on the Shimma's position. Now here, the Allied Fletcher is dropping smoke for Jim, which is a nice thing to do, but I think the timing here isn't very good. I think his intention was to be able to give Jim some cover so that he could put some fire on this opposing Montana, which is in the Delta 8 quadrant. But the Montana's already starting to sail away, and Jim's angling in position relative to this island isn't really allowing him to be able to put any fire on that ship. Now we have another tactical problem, which is the opposing gearing has moved into the Charlie Cap, and now that the Allied destroyers have been thinned to the Allied Fletcher and the Allied Jimijaz, there are no Allied destroyers attempting to contest caps closely. The Allied Fletcher can move back to the cap, but he does not want to engage either a Gearing, which is now taking the cap, or the opposing Khabarovsk. He simply would be out DPM'd. And it would be kind of a suicide run. So Jim's going to get in a few chip shots here on the opposing Montana, but it really isn't going to be amount to much. So this smoke that the Fletcher has dropped is a nice gesture, but I think the timing and positioning, frankly, just wasn't very good for Jim to be able to leverage it well. Jim is going to come back here, and both the Khabarovsk and the Gearing are basically full health. They are going to now detect the Allied Fletcher, and he is simply going to get focused out here very quickly. In fact, actually, I think he ends up taking a torpedo from the opposing Gearing. Jim is going to pop his radar here. The opposing Gearing is actually almost on the edge of Jim's radar range, so Jim is only going to be able to get in a few salvos here on the Gearing, and there, in fact, there goes the Allied Fletcher on this flank. So if we look at the mini map, while the ship situation, while the Allied team and the opposing team have an even number of ships, Jim is the only Allied ship on this flank, and he is going to turn around and start moving back towards the rest of the fleet because he doesn't want to get caught by a full health Khabarovsk and a very healthy Montana. And so he's going to back up here, and then he's going to get turned around because he knows that he's about to get cornered by the opposing ships that are at the Charlie Cap. So Jim's going to make his turn here. I think he's probably hoping that he's not going to get caught broadside by the Montana as he's making this turn. Here comes some torpedoes from the Khabarovsk, but they're only 6-kilometer torpedoes, so he should be okay. I put some fire on the Khabarovsk, but here is the opposing Montana. Jim is going to turn out here. He is going to take a pen through the stern, but he's going to have to kite away here. I think he wants to be able to try to get to this island that is on his port side. But the opposing Montana is going to be able to get in another salvo on Jim here before he's able to get into cover. So Jim is going to have to do some kiting posture, and then here comes the next salvo. He's going to turn out to mitigate the number of shells that might strike him. He does take another shell, but is able to mitigate most of the potential damage from that last salvo, and then Jim is going to slip into some concealment here, and he should be able to, and he's now in some cover. Now, the The Allied team has now gotten a 2-ship advantage, which is good, but the problem they have is they only hold 1 cap, and the Allied Großer Kurfürst is going to move into the Bravo cap. In fact, there we just lost an Allied Bismarck, so their ship advantage is only 1. The Allied Kurfürst is going to move into the Bravo cap, but he's such a huge target, and it's obvious that he's there, that he's going to constantly be reset, and now he's just going to be the focus of the opposing team, and he's now put himself into a crossfire between the Montana and the Des Moines and the Hindenburg. Jim is now, with the opposing Montana putting his attention on the Bravo cap, Jim has a broadside on the Montana, and he's just going to send AP salvos into the Montana side here, into the upper belt and superstructure, and between the fire that's burning and that last salvo he takes at the Montana. But they end up losing in Iowa, and the Allied Kurfürst again is probably still under some sustained pressure. He may also have been taking some torpedoes from the opposing gearing, which was last detected on between the Bravo and Charlie cap. So the Allied team is now, even though they have a ship advantage, they are down on caps and are down on points by 120 points. And so they're going to continue to fall behind here. Now, Jim has used his radio location because he knows that he has 2 opposing destroyers potentially at the Charlie area. He can definitely see some gunfire coming in from the Khabarovsk, so he knows at least the Khabarovsk is here. And he knows that the Khabarovsk has 6-kilometer range torpedoes. So long as he keeps his distance, he should avoid taking torpedoes from there. And he also knows that he's got an opposing gearing. His main concern in abandoning the Charlie cap was actually the Montana, which, again, like I said, has now been taken out. The Allied Kurfürst is finally taken out, and so now we're even on ships again, and the Allied team is down by about 250 points. Now, Jim is coming to intercept this full health Khabarovsk. Now, I mentioned earlier about his use of AP, or the armor-piercing shells against destroyers, and traditionally the argument has always been use high explosive. And that is definitely true for battleships, but for heavy cruisers on the Khabarovsk, AP is very effective, and with the preferred or the beneficial pen angles that the Des Moines benefits from, Jim in 2 salvos takes off more than 16,000 health. Now he's taken off another 6, and with that he finishes off the Khabarovsk. So in 4 salvos, at a rate of about 1 salvo every 5.5 seconds, not including adrenaline rush, he takes out a full health Khabarovsk, which is you would not have been able to do with 203 millimeter HE, because the Khabarovsk has a 50 millimeter plate, which most 203 millimeter shells other than the Hindenburg cannot penetrate without IFHE. So the Jim radars the opposing gearing, and the Allied team is now able to take the gearing out. Now it is a 3-on-2 situation. So the Allied team has secured Bravo, but the cap count is equal, and the opposing team is still up by 200 points. So it is still necessary, with the time remaining, that these 3 ships coordinate, get at least 1 more cap, and at least sink at least 1 more ship with the time remaining. So you can see in chat, Jim has asked the Jimijaz to focus on capping. So the Jimijaz is going to go get Charlie, and Jim is going to move towards Bravo, where the opposing cruisers were last seen. So that between himself and the other Des Moines, they can try to get one of the 2 opposing cruisers down, hopefully without either one of them losing their lives. Now, they're also trying to put some fire on these opposing cruisers to be able to reset the cap. Jim does get a reset on the Hindenburg, And here he is going to put some shells on the opposing Des Moines. And frankly, the Des Moines should be the priority now that he's shown up anyway, because he is lower health. In fact, you can see one of Jim's allies that in one of the ships that had perished earlier is requesting that they focus on the Des Moines. Now, Jim's other ally, Des Moines, which is far less healthy than Jim is had to peel away because he doesn't want to be the focus of two heavy cruisers that between the two of them could sink that allied Des Moines quite quickly. They've lost sight of the two opposing cruisers, and therefore right now it looks like they have no method to reset the cap again. Jim is taking just hoping to hit them by chance, but his shot is coming too late and he won't be able to get a reset. There's a broadside Hindenburg here. Surprised he had not yet switched AP, and now he is switching. But now the Hindenburg's gone in concealment, and now he can see the Des Moines. Again, the Des Moines is preferable to be able to hit, and he's going to lose them from the island. Now the Jimijaz has secured Bravo, and he's now moving to the Delta cap to secure that cap. But things are very dire. The current situation is they've got the opposing team has 2 caps. They're gaining at 8 points per 10 seconds, and they're 40 points from winning. So the Jimijaz has to get into Charlie to slow the rate of their advance. And between Jim and his other ally, Des Moines, they have to sink one of these 2 cruisers to have any chance of staying in the game. Now, the Hindenburg being full broadside would normally be more desirable, but the opposing Des Moines has now made an error of turning himself too broad to Jim, and Jim is now going to put fire on this Des Moines. And there he earns Confederate, and they almost have him down. There's a fire, and the fire's put out. Last few hundred hit points, and there, I think with that salvo that's just going in, he's going to sink the Des Moines. So he's sunk the Des Moines, and they've now limited the opposing team to 1 cap, so they're gaining 4 points every 10 seconds. The opposing team is now about 60 points from winning. So they've got a little bit of time to be able to finish capping Charlie and hopefully find the Hindenburg and sink him. But if not, now that they hold 3 caps, their rate of advance should allow them to win. Jim is going to move back down south here. There, the Jimijaz is spotting the Hindenburg. The Hindenburg, obviously without radar, is not going to be able to see the Jimijaz unless the Jimijaz deliberately reveals himself by either getting too close or opening fire, which he should not do. He should just continue to spot the Hindenburg. This is one of the places where I find it can be a little difficult in a Des Moines to hit a moving target at such ranges that the shell ballistics are quite floaty at that range. But you can see now that the Allied team is very close to taking the lead, and they have about a minute and a half left of time. And so long as nobody on the Allied team is sunk, they will take the point lead here in just a moment. And in fact, they will end up winning on points here very shortly. So a great effort by Jim and his 2 allies to coordinate on capping, to coordinate on spotting, and putting focus fire on ships and being able to get bring the lead back and be able to win the game. So great job, Jim and his team. So let you look at the results. He did a really good job. 135,000 damage, 3 kills, comes in top XP for his team, along with the 2 other allies that survived the match. So I hope you enjoyed the replay and the commentary. Please do leave your comments below. And as always, we hope to see you out there, and we wish you happy sailing.